My name is Brooke. I built my business from scratch when I was 26. I didn't inherit anything. I didn't get help. I didn't have investors. I worked 3 jobs at once, slept on floors, packed orders at midnight, coded my own website, ate cereal every night, and built a skincare e-commerce store that exploded faster than I ever imagined. By 29, I had a warehouse, a fulfillment partnership, and I was finally making enough to breathe. For the first time in my life, I felt like I actually earned a future with my own hands, not from begging, not from being chosen, not from waiting for family crumbs. And that's exactly when my parents started to fear me. Not because I failed, because I no longer needed them. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. My sister Jenna was always their favorite. She was the image child, the one they bragged about everywhere. She quit everything she ever tried. But Mom always framed it as pivoting to discover her calling. Meanwhile, if I failed one thing in my childhood, they treated me like I was defective. So when my business took off, my success didn't elevate our family. It threatened their hierarchy. They weren't proud. They were threatened. The shift began subtle. Little sarcasm at family dinners. Comments like, "You're getting a little full of yourself now with money. Don't forget who raised you. You need grounding. This can get to your head." They were preparing mentally to justify taking something from me. Then the real sabotage started. My mom started telling relatives that she was worried about me, that I was obsessive, that I was working myself into breakdown pattern, that I was emotionally unstable from stress. She said it with the fake, caring tone that manipulative mothers use to inject a lie that doesn't sound like a lie. Then my dad began concern conversations with cousins, old friends, extended family. Brooke's snapping under business pressure. She's not mentally stable to run a company. She is getting erratic. I noticed people were suddenly speaking slowly to me on calls, like I was fragile, like I was breakable. I didn't know why yet. Then one afternoon, I walked into my warehouse and my assistant manager pulled me aside. "Your parents contacted the head shipping partner and told them you were mentally unfit to continue making stable business decisions." My stomach flipped. "Why would they even do that?" I whispered. "They told them you asked them to step in. They said you wanted them to secure control temporarily because you were having breakdown episodes." I froze. Because that was not confusion. That was intentional smear setup. 2 days later, Mom and Dad sat me down in my own living room, bold like they owned the air. "Brooke," Mom said gently like she was comforting a cartoon toddler, "we know the business is too big for you now. You're overwhelmed. Let us take care of the operations for you. We will protect you." Dad nodded slow like he was a doctor delivering a clinical diagnosis. "You're not thinking clearly lately. You need time to rest mentally." I stared at them blankly. "Who told you that?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "We know you're struggling. Everyone sees it," Dad replied. Then Mom dropped the next bomb like it was casual. "We already talked to the board of advisors you picked early on. They agreed Jenna should step in as interim CEO while you take a mental break." Jenna walked into my house right then. Smug, smiling, twirling her hair. She didn't build one brick of this company, yet she walked in like she was entitled to inherit it. She sat on the edge of the sofa and tilted her head. "It'll be easier if you don't fight this. You're not well, Brooke. Let us help you before you destroy what you built." I felt nausea rise in my throat because this wasn't just a betrayal. This was a hostile takeover disguised as mental health rescue. I suddenly realized every rumor they were spreading, every whisper, every concerned tone, was part of a plan to gaslight me into surrendering ownership. My own parents chose my sister to replace me, not because she earned it, but because it fit their fantasy hierarchy. They wanted to own the thing I built. They wanted me to be grateful they stole it. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stared at them all sitting there, rewriting my identity into a liability, so they could hold the throne, because in that moment, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just a tool they wanted to harvest until it fed their status. So I stood up, walked toward my office desk, and quietly opened a drawer. Not emotional, not dramatic, just calculating. Because if this was the game they wanted to play, I was going to play back. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. I had already made friends in places they didn't even know existed. I drove straight to my office that night, and I didn't tell a single person what happened. I didn't text my parents. I didn't respond to Jenna's fake little check-in message, and I didn't defend myself to anyone they poisoned behind my back. I needed silence to think strategically, the kind of silence where dangerous people make very smart decisions. I sat in my office with the lights off, only the glow of the computer monitors reflecting off the glass wall. I stared at my own logo on the wall, the one I designed myself, the one I hand-built pixel by pixel when nobody believed in me. I didn't go through 4 years of bruised knuckles and debt and breakdowns and rebuilding to let my parents narrate me into insanity for profit. I pulled every file, every contract copy, every clause, every early-stage shareholder agreement, every NDA, every partner ever signed with me. My parents thought I was just emotional. What they forgot was that I was also precise. They didn't know I quietly documented everything for years because deep down I always knew they'd try to control me eventually. The next morning I met with my corporate lawyer. This lawyer didn't know my parents existed. I never let my business and my family intersect. I slid a stack of printouts across the table and told her everything line by line, without crying, without dramatics, without giving any manipulation angle. She stared at me and said one sentence. "Brooke, they cannot legally remove you. They have no authority. You are the only majority shareholder." Meaning, they couldn't take my company. They couldn't install Jenna legally. They only had power if I emotionally surrendered to their narrative. I finally exhaled. Next step, I had to see how far their smear had gone. I scheduled private meetings with each of my advisory board members. Not group, one by one. Every single one told me the exact same thing. Your parents made it sound like you begged them to take over because you were losing control emotionally, and every single one looked visibly stunned when I calmly, clearly, and confidently laid out exact, verifiable timeline evidence that everything was fabricated. Their faces changed. The pity shifted into alarm. My parents didn't just gossip. They manipulated business infrastructure with deliberate, malicious intent. And them pushing Jenna into CEO role? That was premeditated corporate hijack. This wasn't family drama anymore. They crossed into theft attempt territory. By the end of those meetings, every member of my advisory board was back on my side and furious at how they were weaponized. That night, I got an email from my mom. "You are making this harder than it needs to be. Sign the transfer papers and let your family take care of what you cannot handle." Then Jenna followed with, "Brooke, when the transfer is official, I'll make sure you get a director role. You'll still be part of things. You just can't be in charge. You aren't good at leading. Accept that." They wanted me small. They needed me small. Because if I wasn't small, their entire identity structure collapsed. That night, I stared at both messages, but for the first time in my entire life, their words didn't cut. They didn't even bruise. They just sounded pathetic. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my lawyer again, and we spent the next 3 hours preparing something that would ensure they never got near my business again. Even socially, even symbolically. This wasn't revenge yet. This was preparing the ground for revenge, because they tried to destroy my life for power. So I was going to take something real back from them, something money and lies couldn't repair, something they never expected I could touch. I did not scream. I did not cry. I moved. Like a woman who had spent years practicing patience until it hardened into a weapon. The lawyer and I worked all night. We rewrote bylaws, not with drama, but with surgical precision. We created a binding voting trust for founders' shares, an instrument that gave me decisive voting control while protecting the company from impulsive outside influence. We inserted clear clauses that required multi-party authorization for any executive replacement or transfer of controlling interest. We tightened signature requirements on banking, shipping, and vendor changes so no single call from worried parents could flip the business on a whim. Every change had a paper trail. Every change had a timestamp. Everything was airtight and deliberate. The next morning, I called the board into an emergency meeting. In person, not a group email. I asked them to come to my office and look me in the eyes. No one from my family was invited because invitations were not their right. They were my decision. One by one they filed in, advisors I'd recruited in scrappy early days, the warehouse manager who'd stuck with me through broken forklifts and 2 a.m. orders, the designer who'd drawn my original logo on a napkin. They watched me hand a thick folder to each of them, copies of the calls, the emails, the voicemail transcripts, the dates Mom and Dad had reached out to partners, and the literal timeline showing my parents' attempts to insert Jenna into leadership. I didn't want this to be a fight, I said to them plainly, but if they try to steal what we built, I will not stand aside. They read the documents in silence. The pity vanished from their faces and was replaced by old loyalty, the kind you earn when you build something together in trenches. We voted. We signed the new trust agreements. We updated the operational controls. And then, because I was not naive about how ruthless my parents could be, I executed the contingency plan I'd quietly prepared months earlier. I granted emergency cosign authority to 3 longtime senior employees and to the fulfillment partner who kept our promises during holiday chaos, plus a corporate safeguard that required any leadership change to be ratified by a 2/3 board majority. That meant even if my parents somehow convinced one naive advisor, they could not override a board of people who actually worked for the company. When Mom called the fulfillment partner pretending concern, he politely redirected her to legal. When Dad tried the patronage route with the supplier forwarded the message to corporate compliance. Their calls bounced off the new structure like pebbles against a locked door. But I didn't stop there. I quietly accelerated an employee stock option plan and allocated it to the team that had been with me since the warehouse nights. It was not charity. It was alignment. It made them official stakeholders, not just workers, and it created cultural ownership where my family's takeover fantasy could not take root. Those options vested on a schedule and required board consent for any transfer. They weren't flashy, they were permanent. Jenna came to the office that afternoon in high heels and a borrowed air of entitlement, expecting to be ushered into a brand new CEO office with my logo on the door and my assistants folded into her schedule. She walked into a conference room and faced a wall of people who had built the company with blood and who had defended it with loyalty. "Your mother called me and said I should take over," she began, voice a practiced combination of sweetness and threat. I shut the laptop and looked at her like she was a stranger. "You did not build this," I said. "You have no operational experience here. You have no support from the people who run this company, and your presence here is not a courtesy." The room was still. The co-founders exchanged silent nods. The senior warehouse manager glanced at Jenna like someone who'd seen a con in action before. Within 48 hours, Jenna's interim CEO narrative evaporated. The board issued a formal notice. No leadership changes without demonstration of relevant experience and board approval. My parents were informed politely but firmly that any further interference would be considered a breach of conduct and be documented in the official corporate records. That phrasing mattered. They had no legal lever, no sympathetic board member left, and nowhere credible to go. They called me. Dad yelled. Mom dialed manipulation. They threatened family reputations. They threatened to take it to court, a phrase they used often as if legal chaos would scare me. I let them make their threats in their own time while the company continued to ship orders, while emails were answered, while new product samples were approved. The business did not crumble because I was not fragile. It stood because everyone who mattered had their heads down doing the work. Then came the final blow. The part they never expected because their arrogance assumed I could only fight with emotion. I invited several of the top partners, including an earlier investor who'd believed in me when I had nothing, to a private planning retreat under the guise of roadmap strategy. We met on a Friday. Over coffee, I told them exactly what had happened and showed them the timeline. They were furious, not because I asked for revenge, because someone had tried to weaponize a business against its founder for personal gain. Within a week, 2 prominent suppliers, the ones my parents had once bragged about knowing personally, reached out to the board to confirm policies. They reaffirmed contracts directly with the company under the new governance terms we'd set. No more backdoor deals. No more phone calls pretending to be help. My parents' network, which had always been their power, simply closed. Word of the attempted takeover stayed quiet among the professional partners because we handled it with documentation and governance, not with social media spectacle. The difference was critical. It prevented the kind of sensational viral exposure you'd see in a drama, but it also prevented those partners from being pressured into taking sides publicly. They stayed neutral, loyal to the company, and that suffocated any avenue my parents had hoped to use. They grew desperate. Mom called me from a blocked number pleading. Dad tried to turn distant cousins against me by implying I'd become unreasonable, but the cousins now had contracts with my company and didn't want to risk business relationships. The more they tried, the thinner their influence appeared. The final image I will never forget is my mother standing in my driveway the next week, eyes wet but not with concern, with calculation and disbelief, as she watched me load a box of new product labels into my car, laughing softly with the fulfillment manager about a shipping detail. She mouthed something I couldn't read. Then she left. They did not get my company. They did not take my control. They did not install Jenna as CEO. Instead, what I did was structural, practical, and irreversible in the places that mattered: operational control, board loyalty, partner contracts, and cultural ownership by the people who actually built the brand. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't loud. It was rock-solid bureaucracy and alignment, the tools of business that my parents had never learned to fear because they only ever tried to wield social leverage and family pressure. Jenna stopped answering calls. My parents started showing up at family gatherings older and quieter, like people who'd lost a fragile crown and could not admit what it felt like. I packed one of my office mugs into a box the night I closed the final document with my lawyer. Signatures in place, protections locked. I sat at my desk, and for the first time in years, the wheels under me felt stable enough to build on again. They taught people to believe I was fragile. They taught other people to believe they could cash in on my breakdown. I taught them that a woman who builds with her own hands will defend what she built, not with noise or scandal, but with method, and that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply making sure no one can ever take what you made away from you again. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.